started again with the next portion of our program. My name's Gary Lesswing. I'm an extension educator down in Nemaha County, and I'm also the Nebraska SARE coordinator. And SARE's a big proponent of cover crops, but Keith wanted me to introduce Paul and Ray Ward. We're going to start with Paul Jasa. They're going to talk about cover crops and their effect on nutrient management in corn and soybeans. And, you know, that's one of the issues that Dan alluded to that already. So that's a big concern, and that's why sometimes we're seeing some yield issues. So Paul's done about as much research as anybody in eastern Nebraska here with cover crops, and he's going to tell you what he's found out, and then Ray is going to repute everything he said. So
correct me.
So we'll get started. So go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Ray and I were tossing a coin. Who goes first? I says I'll go first so I can correct everything I say wrong. I'm going to share with you some basic experiences collected primarily at the Rogers Memorial Farm, which is about a half-hour south of here. It's about 10 miles east of Lincoln. Cover crops put it first because that's what we're talking about. But more important, it's going to be the residue. I want residue out there. I want residue to cycle. Ray's going to talk about some of that. Everything I can say, Ray's going to talk about, so I can just fly through these, right? Nutrients, Ray's by far more the expert, so I'm going to show you a few things I've observed and see what's going on there. But the key thing is going to be soil biology. When it comes to cover crops, there's a lot of different reasons people are using them. As Keith said, the erosion control. Here in the sloping hills, eastern Nebraska, erosion control is probably our number one. That's why last year we focused on the cereal rye. Get something out there, absorb raindrop impact, get something out there to slow the water down, get something out there to anchor the soil. Let's do that. NRCS has that at the top of their list as well if you've got some EQIP or CSP or some cost share programs. Nutrient capture, nutrient cycling, like I say, Ray's going to go into that a lot more, but we see a lot of covers being used to take up the excess nutrients that are in the field left over from last year's crop, and let's put it in a biological form, and then as that residue breaks down in cycles, we can get those nutrients back. Now, the place we see it more often in, not so much here, but a little further west of here, there's a lot of hail out fields that get planted to covers, just to take up nutrients that were applied for that cash crop that got hailed out. Improve soil health, I'm definitely after that. Now, there's others on the list there. We had a full day of talking all those topics. That's about what it would be, is an hour on each one of those. The water management, the biodiversity, the carbon nitrogen ratio, all those things, you take those into account. But what I'm looking at on the biodiversity and carbon nitrogen ratio is, do you want more residue? Do you want less residue? Do you want to cycle the residue? Do you want to accumulate residue? And again, it depends. Earlier you are in a no-till system, start putting covers in, you might think you have too much residue. I need a little more nitrogen in my system to break it down. Someone like me has been in no-till a long time. My biological activity is such that I want a lot more carbon to my system. You can't go to the co-op and buy carbon. I can go to the co-op and buy nitrogen if I need to. So again, where are you at in your system? Nitrogen fixation, I'm going to talk a little bit about some work I've done. Ray will talk more about it. Nitrogen fixation, that is the nutrient we can make with cover crops. You can't make phosphorus, potassium, sulfur. You can redistribute it in the soil, but if I'm hauling those things away, I'm going to have to replace those things. Nitrogen I can make. The key is, as you're planting a legume, make sure you have the right inoculant for that species. Just because you've got a history of soybeans, since who knows when, doesn't mean a vetch or an alfalfa or something like a pea is going to have the right inoculant out there. So get the right inoculant. Reduce compaction. I prefer to look at it the other way around, make the soil more resilient to compaction, because I'm building the healthier soil with more roots. Weed suppression, appreciate Rodrigo's comments on that this morning. It's something we've seen a lot. Forage grazing, I'm going to provide livestock in the soil. I'm providing the food for them. Now, forage grazing, in my opinion, that is a different crop. That is a forage crop or a grazing crop. And I say it's different because I'm going to manage it slightly different. For instance, I may put some nutrients to it because I'm trying to raise something, the beef. I'm going to put some water to it because I'm trying to raise some biomass to feed the beef. Remember, I don't have livestock. I'm looking at feeding the soil. So mine's going to be treated a little bit differently. So again, which one do you plant? It depends. A lot of guys are going to cocktails now. Cocktails where you blend, so you can get several of those benefits there. Well, when it comes to soil biology, I have that on my title slide. Corn soybean rotation, Missouri river bottoms. 2011, you may remember we had pretty good flood. There's some fields there that are underwater for 3-4 months. Think about any soil biology. It basically died because it didn't have any air exchange, didn't have any gases, didn't have any food. John Wilson up in Burt County worked with a producer, simply put out oats. Late February, early March, got oats growing to start the soil biology going. That soil biology primarily looking at mycorrhizal fungi. Look at the yield increase where he had no cover. Now this is irrigated corn. Oat pea mix, a little bit more extra. But again, the main response was get that soil biology going. And that's one of the things I love about covers is feeding the soil biology. Keep that moving. Now, when it comes to corn soybean rotation, that's roughly all the data I've got in corn soybean rotation. I'm a firm believer in broader crop rotations. And our Rogers Memorial Farm, where I do a lot of our work, I got wheat in rotation as well. But when it comes to increasing biological diversity, when it comes to thinking about some of the options of cover crops, we already heard it this morning, you've got more options if you've got wheat out there. Now, especially if you're going to look at growing some nitrogen, you need a longer growing period there. After corn or bean harvest, planting a legume, you don't get much growth in the fall. In the spring, depends upon the spring, you may not get much growth. You may not get a lot of legume production of nitrogen. That's all right. Like I say, I can go to the co-op and buy the nitrogen. I want to grow some carbon, perhaps. So again, put some forages in rotation, maybe. Use the cover crops. Get the diversity out there. Again, the diversity is going to feed the soil health. But here's a Google Earth photograph of a 10-acre field at the Rogers Memorial Farm. It was in back in the early 80s. It was a solid-state irrigation system that we've not used for irrigation for the last 25, 30 years. But what it does is nicely defines all the plots the same length, the same width. After wheat harvest, 2011, I went out there and I seeded. The plots are 12 rows wide. These are 270 feet long. These were a lot longer, so I cut them in half. They're about 240 feet long. So this is not a little 10 by 10 plot hand harvest. This is actual machine, application machine, harvest, so on. 12 rows wide, a couple hundred feet long. You see the different stripes there. Google Earth photo just had to be taken the right time to show different cover crops after the wheat harvest. I went out there and I put down, first off, I put down 5 rates of nitrogen. The strips there, the little browner, they don't have a cover there. What you see is a little bit of volunteer wheat, perhaps. 5 strips of nitrogen were 0, 40, 80, 120. Then I skipped up to 200 pounds of nitrogen. Going to build a nitrogen rate response curve. Then the covers out there, I had 9 different cover treatments. And I put down a base rate of nitrogen. I say base rate. I won't claim that the cover can produce all the nitrogen you need, especially the first year out. What I'm looking at is a supplemental source of nitrogen, perhaps. Again, I'm looking more at soil biology. The supplemental source of nitrogen, I said, I'm going to put down 80 pounds of nitrogen and then check the yields and see what happens. And again, this is replicated 3 times. The nitrogen rate response curve. There's my different rates, the 0, 40, all the way on up to the 200. Nitrogen rate response curve fit pretty good. In fact, the data sets were pretty tight. The curve itself, 80 pounds of nitrogen gave you 89 bushel of corn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You remember 2012? It was a drought year. 80-pound base rate was probably more than enough I needed for any of my plots out there.
All you're doing.
How do you plant ahead? And again, if I'm planting a legume after wheat harvest, what's next year going to be like?
Trying to separate it.
I don't know. What's next spring even going to be like? I don't know.
Okay.
Again, I have difficulty on planning on a lot of this. I want to be flexible, take advantage of it when I can. So there's where my nitrogen rate response curve. It doesn't look like too bad a curve. There's the covers, 9 different treatments. And when you look at it, I put them all on the 80 line because I had an 80-pound base rate. So now when you go up to this group, there's no statistical difference. These 3 on top there was enough statistical difference that if you take come across the line where it hits the line, come down, and you can see those 3 gave about 50 to 60 pounds apparent N contribution. I call it apparent N because I have no idea if it was truly the nitrogen it gave me, or if it's because of the biology, or if it's because of the extra residue, or because of who knows what. But as far as yield, I picked up the same as if I had 60 more pounds of N out there. I can get excited about that, perhaps. Now, okay, you're going to ask, all right, what are those 3? Again, 2012, the drought year. First one was cereal rye. How much nitrogen did cereal rye fix? It may have picked up some nitrogen left over from the wheat, put it in a biological form to give it a time release for the corn later. It may have been the cereal rye gave me more residue that the heat of the drought didn't bother me as much. Again, apparent N. Chickling vetch, that is the favorite among organic producers. It's a higher price seed because organic producers found it years ago. Chickling vetch grows in real cool weather, and it grows the latest in the fall of all these, and then it winter kills. So cereal rye was grown in the spring using some water. Chickling vetch grew the latest in the fall using water. Austrian winter peas, fall and spring using water. And I say that using water. I had a cover using water in front of corn in a drought year, and my yields went up. Too many people are over concerned about covers are going to use water. No, they're doing other things for me too. Now, the statistical line breaks here. These others I've looked at and planted them because other people have been looking at them. I took all the legumes, threw them together. That's my end cocktail here. And again, the cocktail, some people like the idea. I like the idea of you got warm season and cool season stuff. The warm season might frost off, the cool season keeps growing. When the first frost hit, for instance, cowpeas and soybeans were done. The winter ones kept growing. Again, that's why I like the cocktail. All right, that field was 2012. Our 3-year rotation of wheat, corn, beans came back around, such that 2014 it was in wheat again. I planted the covers, and this happens to be a lot more growth because the drought wasn't as bad. This is before the frost in 14. These are just soybeans. This is chickling vetch starting to grow. Again, chickling vetch will grow a lot longer. Did put down my base rate again. 0. I missed my 40 and 80. Something happened. My pressure gauge was reading low. So by the time I got the pressure gauge up to what I wanted, I was over applying the nitrogen. Then I found out the tractor speedometer was reading high. So when I got down to the speed I thought I was, it was actually putting on a lot more rate as well. So rather than 0.4080, this is more like 0.60. Nitrogen rate response curve still set pretty good. Across the line there, my base rate would be 201 bushel corn. What about the covers? They're above the line. But you know, that first one, I didn't get any nitrogen rate response. The top one, when I come across and hit this line and come down, again, I'm in the neighborhood of 60 pounds. And between the 2 years, it's been, I'd say, 40 to 60 pounds for those that are working for me. The good news is that same field is in wheat right now. So in 2017, I'll be planting the covers. 2018, I'll have a 3rd year data from the same field. So we'll see what happens. You're going to ask, well, okay, what's the top ones there? First off, I want to show you this. There's Stu Hoff. This is wheat stubble. How much volunteer wheat do you see? I love that for covers. This is in the spring. This is a cover that he's picking up to see how much growth was there. You know, it doesn't look like much there. That's the chickling vetch that winter killed and went down. A lot of nitrogen there. Chickling vetch was the winner that year, and again, that's like say the one organics like. Remember, it was 201 was the base rate of nitrogen. So I already picked up 24 bushels of corn there. I paid for the chickling vetch seed. I don't know if I paid for nitrogen replacement. Soybeans looks pretty good. And again, 2014 fall, the soybeans grew a long time before they frosted off. Hairy vetch overwintered. Again, that one overwintered. Cereal rye was way down here. Did I need extra residue in 2015? Probably not. So again, what kind of growing season are you going to have? And that's one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit more about. I've got a couple other studies I'm doing out there at the farm. Here's again corn, bean, wheat rotation after wheat harvest. This is simply bin run grain sorghum, bin run soybeans. Now, that'd be the cheap way to do it. I actually use leftover sorghum and soybean seed. Be careful, you can't plant protected varieties, bin run. Now, so a lot of people say, well, covers cost you so much money. You know, bin run grain sorghum, seeded about 5 to 10 pounds per acre. It's only $3 to $5 a bushel. Cover crop seed there is only about 30 to 50 cents an acre. That's a cheap cover crop. Into wheat stubble. Now, the beauty of that is they both frost off. Don't even have to spray them. No extra herbicide. 2016. Here's where the bin run grain sorghum was. Here's no cover. How much volunteer wheat do you see? 35 cents a seed there was the cheapest herbicide. Didn't need to burn down. Now we put down a residual there for our corn production. Here is late May. It's time to do post-emerge. Here's where the grain sorghum is. Here's where there's no cover, which one needed post-emerge. Again, weed control. Appreciate Rodrigo's comments this morning. Here's toward maturity. Here's where the sorghum was. Notice it's a little bit nitrogen deficient. Yes. That carbon, all that grain sorghum residue out there can tie up some nutrients, primarily the nitrogen. Ray's going to talk about that. Here's where there was no cover. Now, it's not as nitrogen deficient, but look how many weeds are there. Again, for weed control, I can love the cover. In that project, I started it back in 2005. 2008 was a nice year. 166 corn, 175, 179. That year paid for the covers for several years that it may not have paid. 2012, the drought year. Basically no difference in yield. Covers didn't hurt me. The year after the drought, because these covers might have used some moisture that should have been stored. Didn't really hurt me. Didn't pay. 2014 or 15, 197, 202 with the legume from the soybeans, 214. That just paid for a lot of years that didn't pay. Until you look at 2016 when I said it's a little nitrogen deficient. Oops, that one hurt. I put down 170 pounds of N onto wheat stubble to raise corn. Recommendation to raise corn on wheat stubble would be a little over a pound per bushel. 170 pounds in, I got 178. I don't think it failed. I just didn't have enough nitrogen there. I tell producers when you're planting into heavy carbon residues of the cover crops, put down some extra starter N. Index close to the row. My problem was my N was, and I just too far away from the row, I was N deficient early. And it stayed N deficient all season long. Now, here it didn't happen. Oh, we put down 200 pounds N that year. So again, be careful. In that project, the wheat goes to corn. In the corn residue, I do carbon versus legume. A lot of people say, well, I need to do some tillage to get rid of that residue. I go, wait a minute, why? Well, vertical tillage tool will cut and slice the residue. I said, so does my drill. Well, vertical tillage tool will put the residue in contact with the soil so it breaks down. I said, so does my drill. My drill puts a cover crop seed in the ground to feed the soil biology. There's about 200 bushel corn residue. This is the same field the next spring, about March 15th. There's Austrian winter peas growing. Fixing some N. By April 15th, they're up and growing. I guess they fixed maybe 75 to 100 pounds in. I don't know for sure. I can love that. Here's a cool spring. Here's April 15th. Here's corn without a cover. Here's corn with a cereal rye cover. I don't have a lot of growth there. And again, when you're planting your cover in the fall, what are you going to have next spring for growing conditions? It's a gamble. What's interesting, though, is this is that same corn, bean, wheat rotation I showed you earlier. Look how much residue is gone compared to this. Soil biology has really been stepped up, having a cover there every year. Here's a warm spring on April 15th. The rye is a lot taller. I like to terminate my rye in front of corn before planting because moisture is so critical in dry land. In soybeans, I can let it go a little longer. Again, this is on my long-term tillage plots where I've incorporated covers into it without tillage. If you're doing tillage to kill the cover, you basically lose the benefit of the cover because of the tillage. People say, how's the cover helping compared to no-till? I say it's not really helping in a corn bean rotation, but it's not hurting. It hurts less than tillage does. So if you're still doing tillage, you'll be ahead by going no-till. Again, a cool spring. No-till with cover, April 15th. Very little residue left. The cereal rye is just breaking dormancy. This over here, see how much more residue there is? That is fall chiseled for 30 years, 35 years. Disc twice in the spring for 35 years. This is the day I went out to do my spring disking. There's more residue here than here. It's because there's more soil biology here than here. I'm feeding the soil biology with my covers. I need to grow more carbon in my covers. I got a carbon legume mix, cereal rye and Austrian winter peas is what I'm using in those plots. In the fall, it looks like this. In the spring, you walk out there, it looks like this, and you go, dang, peas all died. Peas will die back to the top. You plant them deep, every node below the ground will send up a new branch. If you aerial seed them or surface seed them, you're done. If you plant them deep, that's my hand, the seed's down here. The ground level where it was frosted off is way up there, and look at every node below the ground. I've seen as many as 5 coming up. Plant them deep. Now, at that height, look at the nodules already. They're working for me. I can like that. The thing is, I always kill them about then when I'm planting corn because I want to conserve my water. Before planting beans, I'll let them go longer. Now, when Dan talked about planting green, I said I'm going to kill the rye when I'm doing my first spray of Roundup on my Roundup Ready beans. And that actually increased yield slightly because of keeping the sun and wind off those beans, growing more residue out there. Major warning, that's not eligible for crop insurance. As Dan said, 7 days in a continuous no-till system. That one I'm way past the 7 days. Check your crop insurance. Another way to get more growth in your covers, put them on before harvest. Jody's sitting in the back, he's going to talk later. One of his cooperators flew on the cover when the male seed rows were being destroyed. At harvest time, he has cover up and growing. If you got livestock, that's ideal for grazing. If you want to feed soil biology, I wouldn't put as many brassicas in. I'm going to put something else in to feed soil biology, grow more residue. But again, check with your insurance. Seed corn probably doesn't matter because they're self-insured. When it comes to soybeans and other things, it's after maturity. Usually, you're okay. And again, Dan Gillespie on his farm, aerial application, flew on the cereal rye, already protecting that sandy hillside, feeding soil biology. My quickie, if you don't have residue out there, grow some, especially for erosion control. If you got a longer growing season, like corn silage comes off or wheat comes off, grow something because you're wasting sunlight and carbon dioxide. You can't store those without growing something. And if you got a soil that has more water than you can store, grow something. Don't let the water soak away on drainage tile or run off. Again, that's what Dan had on that sand hill. With that, Dr. Ray Ward is going to tell you the real story when it comes to nutrients. Quick commercial for Crop Watch, our crop production, crop scouting newsletter, as they're switching over to Ray's presentation. And as pictured here, attend field days. Look at the soil. When Ray and I are doing a field day, we always dig a soil pit. We look what's going on underneath there. Look at the residue on top. Try to learn as much as you can about that. Quick question while Ray's getting wired. Here's
Any questions for Paul? Thank you. You guys got any questions for Paul?
I'll be around all day. We've got one up front here, I guess. Comment here is having that cereal rye standing up, planting your corn. You get a frost that night or wherever, you got extra blanket there to hold the heat of the soil in. I've seen that. I've seen it actually more in strip till, where you push away your residue, push away any of your blanket. I get more damage of frost on strip till compared to no till, or where I got cover. Now, I'm like Dan, when I'm planting corn, a lot of times it's into dead rye, but it's still a rye blanket sitting there. I don't like planting into green rye.